Aegeron, Part 4. Markhan. To Aegeron, Shadowslayer, Lord Commander of the Netherguard. Hail, Aegeron. I hope this missive finds you well, per your instructions. I am writing to inform you of the fate of the Markhanian people. I must confess I don't quite know where to begin. Since coming to this region many months ago, I have learned much about the people, their culture, and the struggles they face in these uncertain times. As you know, Markhanians are generally suspicious people and easily offended. Although you gave me valuable insight into their customs and laws, I must admit it took me some time to gain their trust. Indeed, nary a day passed without my giving offense to these people in some small way. For most tribes, shaking your head is negative and nodding is positive, except for the few times you warned me of. But initially I had no idea how to interpret a head bobbing side to side. It was similar enough to a shaking head that at first I thought it was an extreme negative, but it turns out it is instead an emphatic or interested positive. I had quite a few near disastrous social interactions before I learned that. Hardest for me was the meet, where two warriors conference without looking at one another. Done correctly, we stand side by side, each looking past the other man's back. They say it is so no one can sneak up on the other warrior while they speak. My instinct, however, was to look straight into the man's eyes, which of course was not only an insult to him, but also marked me as a shokunobim, or one not to be trusted to watch your back. Thankfully, Jishkim, leader of the tribe, took it upon himself to teach me the ways of his people after I saved him from certain death during a raid on his camp in the rocky holdfast of Soldan by a rival tribe known as the Sudani, which loosely translates to Oathbreakers in our tongue. The Shodani are reviled by every tribe I have met. I have yet to determine exactly why, as most of the tribe won't discuss it with outlanders, of which I am one, and even speaking of the Sudani is considered vulgar. Still, I am persisting in my investigation because that little I have learned points to some ancient congress between them and the defiled. Perhaps it's nothing, a legend or even slander, but the thought that this region had seen the defiled before tantalizes me. During my stay, I traveled to the Shalara a great deal and saw firsthand the horrors visited upon the people of this desolate region at the hands of the defiled. Much of the Markhan is a desert, shifting sands to the north in the region known only as the Crucible, and more of the same in the lands to the south. The exception is the middle region, which is a vast collection of high mesas and deep gorges, peppered with fertile havens, mostly along the banks of the Nelrun and the Tarun rivers, though these are fading, as the source, Zaharal, has been poisoned by the defiled, and the rivers are drying up. The once deep blue rivers now take on a sickly green pallor, and anything that drinks in the rivers contracts a wasting sickness, and eventually dies. Indeed, many settlements along the rivers are gone now. There are people moving deeper into the wastelands of Markhan, where there are still oases of clean water. Though these are few and most are claimed by various tribes, I've seen great acts of kindness as refugees are invited to make their camps at some of these havens. I've also seen desperate men and women fight to the death to keep the water for themselves. The Shalira possess a wonder in these wastes. From the ground outside it appears as any other mesa, but the top is sunken like a bowl and contains a small freshwater lake, vegetation, and even fish. From above it must be obvious, but to the others it is a jealously guarded secret. It is a mark of the trust they have in me that I was allowed to visit it at all. It makes me wonder what else hides in the seemingly barren waste, away from the stone travel markers that all the tribes stick so closely to. They all whisper of a very different mesa, known as the Kikasim. They say some nights you can hear thunder there when there are no storms. Sea lights flash atop it's a moonless night, and on such night none who travel to Kikasim return from it. I must admit I was skeptical, but while we traveled past it, the entire tribe grew anxious and quiet, and that night I was wakened by a sound I can't describe, a terrible crash. There is something there, and even the defiled seem to give it a wide berth. Most refugees come from the southern and western cities, where the defiled are firmly in control of everything. Jarin, Qualan, Tolbet, and Alador were once thriving metropolises of unsurpassed beauty, centers of trade, caravans, and ships, traveling throughout Aegeron to bring exotic spices, fine silks, copper, and bronzeware to the eastern and northern nations of Aegeron. Now they are little more than smoldering ruins, where the Markhanians are rounded up and used as slaves, or as sent to hell itself. Tobit was the first city to follow the defiled, who marched unmolested out to the Sundanar, falling on its unsuspected citizens like a plague of locusts. From there the forces of Imperator Azog split, some sailing north along the Tarun River to Zaran Hall, where they utterly decimated the people living there. The largest of Azog's hordes marched south to link up with the Imperator Mazarov fleet. Refugees fleeing the city say Mazarov intends to sail south to the mysterious realm of Koth once all the Markhan has been subdued. But Azog claims Overfiend Blackfist hasn't issued any orders for such a campaign. Jarin's tall earthen walls were 20 feet thick, and the city was widely believed to be impregnable. I had assumed that the Earthrenders destroyed the walls, but according to a survivor I spoke to, the walls still stand to this day. Jarin was lost near the beginning of the campaign, to imps of all things. They flew over the walls at night and took the gatehouses by surprise. Blackfist's troop then simply entered and began to ravage the place. To think what we could have prevented with just a little more knowledge. I suppose that is the real purpose of my time here. I fear there is no one left in Jarin to rescue, but the walls themselves may provide us some advantage if we could retake them. Qualan was more prepared and seems to have offered stiff resistance. Refugees were already leaving, witnessed over a dozen Earthrenders pound the walls and palisades behind them, and claim at least one of the beasts fell. I marvel at the bravery of those soldiers to hold position against such monsters. It cost them everything. I have yet to encounter a surviving soldier from Qualan. According to the Shalariz scouts, all that remain now are rubbish, ash, and bones. The cliffside city of Alador lay mostly abandoned by the time the defiled reached it. I don't know why those that remained chose to do so. Surely they knew they were all doomed. As the defiled swept over them, the cliff collapsed, sending the entire city into the sea. Could they have known? Did they remain as bait for a trap? A sacrifice that saw more defiled destroyed than even at the siege of Qualan? I suppose we shall never know, but the result certainly embarrassed Azog. It is said that Azog and Mazarov hate each other, and Mazarov is jealous of Azog's station as the Overfiend Blackfist commander of the southern continent. Azog feels Mazarov grows too bold, unsatisfied with his appointment as commander of Hell's naval forces on Aegeron. Mazarov seeks glory and believes the conquest of Koth, sanctioned or not, will be enough to prove his worth in Blackfist's eyes. The rift between the two imperators has stalled the effort to subjugate the people of Markhan, allowing the tribes to form fragile alliances, even as conflicts break out between the defiled sworn to follow Azog and those under Mazarov's command. The Markhanians have taken advantage, attacking outposts and patrols with modest victories. Those from the cities have looked down on their nomadic neighbors for generations and are having a hard time adapting to the new situation. They are understandably proud and mistrustful of charity. There is also a simmering distrust, since the walls of the great cities were mostly built to keep out the Jishkim and his folks in the first place. Those Jarim that remain are haughty but fierce allies. When fighting starts, the Eldor are more numerous and isolated. They are the most reticent to commit to alliance, and likewise the most self-sufficient of the refugee groups. There are too few Qualan among us to even form a rapport. The nomadic tribes are just as uneasy with each other as they are with the refugees. There is bad blood between many of them, and no wonder, since it seems following the customs of one ensures the behavior is seen as insulting by another. The Bazarines seem to have the most clout among all the tribes, but are widely considered unacceptable as leaders because they maintain tentative diplomatic connections with the Shudanai, who are anathema to the rest. There is a name for those who leads all the tribes of the Markhan, the Mahabharata. Apparently there has never actually been a Mahabharata before, but the terror of the defiled has led almost all the survivors to believe they need one. Still, there are obstacles to preventing total unification of the remaining tribes. To his credit, Jishkim al-Kabar has done much to try and resolve some of the old hatreds, but much work is yet to be done before he can begin to lead the tribes in force against the demonic strongholds. I've been fortunate enough to follow Jishkim, known by many as the Desert Wolf for his ferocity in battle, and I can say he is a noble man worthy of leadership, though not all share my views. Jishkim has survived numerous assassination attempts, the most recent coming from the Cambion spies, masquerading as escaped slaves from Tobit. It seems that Azog has heard of the Desert Wolf and wants his head on a pike. That alone signals to me that this is a man worthy of our respect. We must be cautious, though. Having outsiders backing him too openly could actually weaken Jishkim's position rather than strengthen it. Alternatively, we could reach out to the Bazarund. They are open to alliances and no strangers to working with strangers of different custom. Their leader Azog Kendall is not half the warrior Jishkim is, but he would be easier to command. It might also open up the possibility of bringing the Shodanai onto the coalition. I admit to being curious about them, but not curious enough to trust them in battle. The Bezarine believe the Shodanai long to be redeemed, but until the opportunity arises, they have no choice but to continue raiding and taking slaves as outsiders. I have my doubts, but my duty is to report all options and circumstances. In closing, I would ask, Lord Commander, that you consider sending reinforcements, and take especially supplies to bolster the efforts to take back Markhan. These are a strange people, but they are all human, all the same, and worth our aid. But for more than just the sake of decency and kindness, I sense an opportunity here. The more pressure we can exert on Azog, the more tenuous his own position becomes. If we can embarrass Azog enough to encourage Mazarov to openly rebel, we might set off the defiled upon one another, let them rend each other instead of our soldiers. And above all else, these people fight. Man and woman, refugee and nomad, there is a steel in them that we will need against the defiled. If you deign to visit in person, allow me to suggest that you keep a hunting bird on your arm or shoulder. It is considered a good omen among the people here, and might play into several of the tribe's prophecies. Before important battles, there is a tradition of letting loose captured birds. They are supposed to carry the souls of the slain warriors away from the battlefield, and many here believe that during a final cataclysmic battle, all those souls will return as raptors to fight for the descendants who still honor and remember them. Though I can't believe it is anything more than a local superstition, I admit I find the image comforting. Your faithful servant, Ogun Demonbane, Netherguard Sentinel.